Welcome everyone, this is On This Restart, and this time we're doing a graphics comparison for Fire Emblem Engage with Fire Emblem Three Houses. Now, Fire Emblem Engage has not released yet, so I'm using footage that's come out from the different trailers, but we're going to be comparing these two different games. We may not be looking at the final build for Engage, and also please do keep in mind there's YouTube compression as well, so what we're seeing may not be a perfect, proper representation of how both games look and compare to each other, but I still think we can get a pretty solid comparison here. And I put together some scenes of some battle sequences that are somewhat comparable for both games, and also some moments from the Monastery and the Somniel as well, the sort of hub areas that you explore in each game. So with that all said, let's jump into it here. So first I'm going to focus on some sort of wooded forest areas for both games and how they kind of compare, and just some of the battle stuff and the UI. So taking a look at Three Houses here, the game released in 2019, when you take a look at the player icons here right before battle, they're just nice little illustrations. There's nothing too complex about them. You see the map. The maps are all fairly simple, but they get the job done. But something that I loved about Three Houses is that when you jump into battle, you actually see these transitions where you see the map transitions into like a 3D environment. It matches up well, it's in sync with it, actually represents where you are in the map. And you can even see like soldiers around you as well, so it gives you a good idea of the actual battle that's going on, which is something I really appreciate. But then now let's take a look at some footage from Fire Emblem Engage, the new game that's coming out. Again, the maps themselves are a little simple, but something I want to highlight here, just with these few little frames I have, what you may notice is that instead of simple little illustrations to compare the two different characters, you literally see the actual player models close up. They look really nice, they're animated, you see movement there. So it's just a nice little representation of the characters, and I think it's actually an improvement over what we saw in Three Houses. But continuing on here, we still see those standard map transitions into 3D environments based off where you are in the area, and it looks great. But something else I'll note here is that this particular footage, by the way, I think is extra compressed, so it may not look very good. But something you may notice is that there are no longer any other soldiers in the area. So the whole Gambit thing, where it's supposed to sort of simulate like actual battles on the battlefield, we no longer see that. It's more like traditional Fire Emblem, where it's just 1 versus 1. And, you know, it's just like a different choice there, I suppose, but it is something that I will kind of miss from Three Houses. I would say that's one thing for sure Three Houses has over Engage, but still there's other things I'm finding in Engage that are standing out a lot that I really appreciate. For example, what you'll see here, even though this footage here I would say is extra compressed, what's really cool is that the attacks seem to be a lot flashier, and they stand out a bit more than the attacks we saw from Three Houses. Like, I mean, if I show you here this attack from Byleth, it's an early game attack admittedly, but even still, they don't get that extra more pronounced. They are a little bit more tame. So, you know, it's just something that's a difference there. You could argue that Three Houses trying to go for a little bit more of a realistic look. But again, you could also sort of note that while there may be a realistic look, they still have associated characters. And there's a bit of a aesthetic clash there as opposed to Engage, where things sort of mesh a lot better because the worlds now look a little bit more animated. But with the animation, we're seeing less texture detail. So you could also argue from Three Houses' perspective, the worlds look more realistic and in a way they look better. But ultimately, I'm finding the presentation of Engage to be more engaging because you can see all the stats right there up front. You can see the characters more animated right before battle. The transitions are still there, and I feel that the environments and the attack animations really do stand out, and it all matches really well. There's a more of a consistent design, I would say, which Engage definitely has going for it over Three Houses. Now, comparing some of the beach scenes here, some things I'll say that I don't necessarily like about Three Houses, like when you take a look at the beach itself up close, it doesn't really look too good. It almost is hard to tell if it's even sand, which is a little awkward. The water is totally fine, the environments are okay, but something I'm going to mention again is that there is definitely a significant visual difference between the player models and the actual world itself. But when we take a look at Engage, I think it really just matches up a lot better. Like, even though they're going for more of an anime look, you can clearly tell that the sand is sand, even a little closer up, and then you still see like these really nice animations from the actual character models. You see they're aiming in different directions, it's just not just right in front of them. And I would say with this less compressed look of the environment, it still looks pretty good. There's a decent amount of geometry in the background with the cliffs and such, and I would say overall visually, this environment looks a lot better than the beach environments we've seen in Three Houses. Even though I wouldn't say it's like extremely impressive either, like you see the sand up close here, it doesn't look amazing. It's actually pretty basic, but because they're going for more of a basic look, there's less for me to sort of complain about, I guess, if that makes sense. Because they're sticking more to that cel-shaded look, you notice less flaws and issues. And the character models just fit so much better. A few other little things I'll point out here. We can see this character's shadow very clearly, while in Three Houses you cannot. Also, there's no clipping of the feet into the ground in these particular shots either. It feels like there's a bit more polish than Engage compared to Three Houses. But now looking at some scenes where there's fire in a town with both respective games, we see a gambit boost here, we can see a giant army attacking. This is something, again, I really liked in Three Houses. Not something you can really see in the other games. I'll also say the textures here, like, because they're going for more of a detailed look, there's more player models on screen. They don't have the highest resolution textures, and you can see that very clearly. A lot of it looks pretty muddy, even though I still think it looks cool that we are getting sort of this visual effect of two armies actually battling each other. And the fire just is kind of there. Actually, when you take a look at it, it doesn't even look like anything's burning. It's just sort of fire in the middle of the screen, but that's okay. And now looking with the Engage environments with fire, you can actually see buildings being burned. I feel like the fire matches a little bit more realistically, and then you have this really cool animation that just stands out a lot more than attack animations we saw in Three Houses. And another little thing I want to point out here, if you look closely at the bottom right of the screen, you can see the shadow from the Wyvern. And then looking at this Wyvern in Three Houses, I still see no real shadow here. It could just be the angle, but, you know, with all those other models on screen, with this being an earlier Switch game and them still getting used to HD development of Fire Emblem and it being partially outsourced, I think maybe that kind of effect just was something they just didn't focus on, so we don't really see too much of it. But now let's compare the Somniel from Engage to the Monastery in Three Houses. My personal opinion is that Somniel seems to be more aesthetically pleasing. It's a little bit easier on the eyes. I like the color choices here, and I don't really notice any like blatant graphical issues because, again, they're going for more of a simple style, so they can get away with simpler textures and things of that nature. And again, the character models just match up a lot better. They fit an animated looking environment as opposed to cel-shaded characters in a semi-realistic looking environment. It's also great seeing just like the character models and how they move around, how they're animated. I really like how they look. It really fits, and it seems like they have a lot of personality. I'll even say that I feel like they're doing a better job of meals with your allies because they use a few different extra angles here. I feel like the background fits a little bit better, even though the textures in the background are very simple. There's nothing too extravagant going on. Overall, I just think the cleaner look with the different camera angles of the different characters during the actual meals is just a far better experience, aesthetically speaking. Then when we take a look at fishing here, again, there's more camera angles here. I feel like the water looks a little bit more active, and it just fits a bit better. Now, it's not to say the monastery doesn't have some good points, like walking around the environment. I do like the look of the monastery. It's going for a more detailed look, and I mean, if you just compare just the environment of the monastery itself, it definitely looks better. But what I'm seeing in Engage is that the character models, again, they just fit so much better with the environments. They're using more camera angles. I feel there's a little bit more energy, and I think there's overall a bit more polish. And that's pretty much my entire sentiment about the differences between Engage and Three Houses. Three Houses has more of a realistic look, so the environments, in a lot of ways, I think you could argue look better, or at least more detailed, but with that also comes some textures that are a little bit more muddy, looks a little bit messier, in contrast to the environments in Engage. Yes, they're going for a simpler look, so there's not as many advanced textures. It's all mostly very animated, cartoon-like environments. It's more of a cleaner, softer look, and sometimes those environments, I think, have pretty good geometry. They still look really nice. And the character models fit a lot better in there. The character models look sharper, they seem to move around more smoothly, the attack animations really stand out, they feel a lot flashier. So the overall presentation, I think, of Engage is something that's a little bit more lively, a little bit more energetic, and flows and feels more natural. And there's some subtle things like more realistic shadows and stuff that I think work in Engage's favor. But then on the flip side with Three Houses, losing seeing multiple character models on screen during battles to really give you that effect of war is gone, and it is something that I am kind of missing, so I'm wondering if we'll see any of that in Engage, maybe not. But obviously, having more character models on the screen is a bit more demanding, so, there may have been concessions made just to have more of a cleaner, more energetic look as we're seeing in Engage. But yes, overall, aesthetically speaking, I think Engage is definitely a nice step up over Three Houses. But what do you make of the differences we've seen between Engage and Three Houses? Have you noticed anything I haven't brought up in this video? Let me know in the comments below. Anyways, everyone, this is On Just Restart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.